There is something about this handheld that might shock you. Something that might make you blush. That's right. It has a huge, massive, enormous, big old... screen. A big screen. It has a big screen. Hey there, I'm TechDweeb, welcome. Thanks for clicking on the video today. I think it's a pretty common thing as reviewers of these retro things to get sick of repeating ourselves. It's easy to look at a device with the same performance and software as the last device that we looked at and say, it's too similar to the last one. I'm sick of talking about this chipset or whatever. Why'd they make this? It's easy to forget, for us, blessed with dozens of retro handhelds and new ones showing up at our door every other freaking day, that most people looking to get a retro handheld are either looking for the first time or trying to decide between a bunch of devices, wondering which one sets them apart and which one's going to be right for them, rather than just another one for the pile funk that us reviewers can find ourselves in on bad days. It's easy to forget that most of these things are freaking amazing wonders of technology that play our favorite retro games real good at an amazing price and might be exactly the thing that the person watching this video might be waiting for. However, that doesn't mean that it's also not simultaneously a barely different rehashed version of the last thing. So I guess everyone's right or wrong. I don't know. I haven't had my coffee yet. Speaking of which... that's better. Let's review this thing. But first things first, we need to address the name, obviously. Amberlick sucks at names, everyone knows that, and I'm awesome, everyone also knows that, so I'm gonna give this thing a new name that fits in with my way better naming scheme for this family of devices. So we got the Zazzbiggle and the Bezazzle, and then we got the Zazzbiddy and the Flipzizzle. And now this thing is the thing from this line of devices that has a big screen, so it's going to be the Zazzbiggle. And if that's not easier to remember than RG40XX-H, well then that's a you problem, I think. So is this Zazzbiggle any good? Does it do anything different? Does it have RGB? The answer to all those questions is yeah. And to be completely honest, I'm really into this thing because this is probably the best choice in this line of devices for a certain customer. A customer who wants a bigger screen, someone who doesn't have a device in this larger horizontal form factor, and someone who wants a device that has mature firmware that works without a bunch of faffing about. And also, here's the thing, even though I have every device in this line, and even though I have a metric ton of handhelds by this point, I'm having a great time with this thing. I love gaming on it, and I'm glad that it exists so that I can recommend it to people who need exactly this. And if you think that might be you after you watch this video, then it's my job to tell you that this Zazzbiggle was sent to me by the fine folks over at LidNXT. And if you want a Zazzbiggle or any other fun retro toy, check out the links in the doodad below. So first, let's talk about the specs. Here they are. And there they go. Yeah, you don't care about the specs. Everyone knows the specs. It's the same guts in all these things, but there is one change in the specs that's worth talking about. The screen. We have a bigger screen here than all the other Zazzy handhelds, and this is a pretty big deal, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. The form factor is the other main thing that sets this thing apart. Because we have a bigger screen, that means that we need a bigger device, and that also means that we need some curvy ergonomics to support the larger size device. So the edges of the Zazzbiggle are much more rounded than its little brother, the Zazzbizzle. I wasn't really into this thing when I saw it in photos and like videos. I'm usually more of a fan of inline bumpers and triggers and lower profile sticks to maximize the pocket factor. But when I got my hands on this, I instantly understood why each of these changes were the right way to go. This thing is super comfortable in the hands. It's more comfortable than lots of devices that I have and that I love. This might be one of the most comfortable cheap handhelds that I've ever used. And that's saying a lot because I have a lot of these things. Way too many. Oh my god, why do I keep buying these? The device that I have that reminds me the most of the Zazzbiggle is the TrimUI Smart Pro. It's got the same kind of rounded edges, the same stick placement, a similar bumper and trigger situation. It kind of looks the same, but the Zazzbiggle wins not just because it's more comfortable, but also because it's less wide and less heavy. This thing is exactly as big as it needs to be to support a nice big screen that's perfect for retro games, nice spacious controls, while still being compact and pocketable. Actually, let's check that out now. Hey you! Yeah, what's up? You want to make $1? Heck yeah, I do. Do me a favor and shove this in your pocket. Okay. See? Look at that. It's fine in the pocket. It's not teeny tiny like the Zazzbiggle that can live in your pocket all day every day, but it's small and slim enough that you could carry it around if you needed to. Alright, that's good. Here's your $1. Thanks, man. I gotta go buy a flower for my sweetie. Aw, that was wholesome. The controls on the Zazzbiggle are good. Same thing with all these Zazzy handhelds, which means good D-pad, okay bumpers and triggers, great buttons, terrible sticks. That sums up pretty much all the recent Amberlic devices. So the bumpers and triggers are a little clicky, but they're fine. The D-pad is actually good. It's comfortable and the inputs feel good. No big issues with like false diagonals. And the buttons are great. They're nice and firm with a satisfying feedback. And the sticks suck. They have cardinal snapping and they're not very accurate. They're okay for basic use, but any game that needs really precise inputs won't be great on these. However, most retro games don't need that, so it's fine. It's not much to complain about, to be honest. Not that any grown adult would ever complain about something as trivial as a D-pad or analog sticks on a retro handheld. Surely we've all got more important things to worry about, right? The system on here is Amberlic's thing. It's the same system that's on all these Zazzy handhelds. I guess this could be called the Zazzy OS. It's got a nice ring to it. It's a fine operating system. It's not flashy or feature rich, but it works. You can go into the games menu and in here you can launch your games and the games load up and play well. You can use hotkeys to open the RetroArch menu. You can save and load your state. All the controls are mapped correctly. You can make changes to anything in RetroArch and save your settings. And the games lists are pretty good for the most part. I just have the 64 gigabyte base model, which comes with decent ROM sets for the lower end stuff like NES and Game Boy, Super Nintendo, and then you get a smattering of higher end games for like Nintendo 64 and Nintendo DS, and then PS1 and PSP and Dreamcast. And obviously if you get a different version that comes with a bigger SD card, you'll get bigger and better ROM sets. However, my suggestion is just to go with the base model and add your own second SD card with your own games on it. And I wanted to mention that there is an early build of Newly for the Zazzbiggle, which is available if you're a supporter. It's an alpha. There's a few rough edges. I tried it out and it mostly worked fine, although at one point I had to reflash my card. However, since there is an early build already, that means that this firmware will definitely be coming pretty soon to the Zazzbiggle. I made a whole video about this firmware and why I love it. Check that out linked in the doodad below if you want to know more. So with that out of the way, let's play some games, shall we? And if you're familiar with the compatibility and the performance of this chipset from the different Zazzy handheld videos that I've made, then there's going to be no surprises here. But I'll give you the quick version if you're not familiar. You'll be able to play everything up to and including PS1 with no problems at all. Most systems have some interesting presets and shaders and stuff applied, and I like them for the most part. However, it's easy to turn those off or swap them around depending on your preference. Performance on this older stuff is amazing, obviously. You can even run PS1 games with enhanced resolution, and every game will still run flawlessly. N64 is going to be mostly okay. They have some good defaults selected, so only the hardest games won't run well. Dreamcast runs pretty good. It runs at full resolution and the controls are bound fine. Obviously not every Dreamcast game will run perfect, but everything that comes on the device and everything I tried worked fine. You'll be able to play most Nintendo DS and some of it can be upscaled. Obviously, since we don't have a touchscreen, you can't tap stuff with your finger. I mean, you can tap stuff, but it's not going to do anything. They have this set up so that you can use the analog stick for stylus control and tapping, and it's actually pretty fun to play like this, depending on the game, of course. PSP is going to be another one that's kind of hit or miss, but you can play most stuff on here. Since PSP is a 16:9 system, it's usually on the small side with smaller devices, but it's not as small here because the screen is bigger. So it's better here than on any of the other Zazzy handhelds. But like the performance and the compatibility, none of this is new or specific to the Zazzbiggle. What is new here is that all of those old retro games and the newer 3D stuff, they're now running on a bigger screen. And I can't understate how different it feels playing these games on a 4-inch screen compared to a 3.5-inch screen. I know it doesn't sound like much of a difference, it's just half an inch, but that ends up being a 30% bigger screen by surface area. I get lots of comments all the time from you guys saying that you don't like, the Miu Mini or whatever because it's a 3.5-inch screen and it's just too small. I don't have a problem with smaller screens, but everyone's preferences are different. And I have to admit that even for me, being able to see these retro-y pixels clearly on a bigger screen is a really nice experience. We don't have that many 4-inch screen devices. Usually handhelds are either big things with wide screens that are way less pocketable, or they're small 3.5-inch screens. Amberlick does have some other 4-inch screen devices, but most of those are niche things. The 405M is great, but it's a premium metal handheld with a premium price tag. And the stock OS sucks, and it's a pain in the butt to flash it. The same thing with the 405V, and that thing is just weird in general, and definitely not pocket friendly. The RG Arc is great, that's a 4-inch screen device and I love it, but it's a weird one. It's not going to be for everyone, and no analog sticks, and not pocketable. And that's pretty much it. And no other 4-inch screen devices. Which is baffling to me because gaming on a 4-inch screen is such a great way to experience retro games. And they barely had to sacrifice anything in terms of pocketability. This thing is way more pocketable than most 4-inch or bigger screen devices. Just as pocketable as the Bezazzle or the Flip Zizzle. I'm gonna wrap this up with a story. I have an uncle that I know is into old games. My whole life at family gatherings, we'd always talk about the games we were playing. He loves old Castlevania games and old PS1 RPGs. He loves GBA. A few months ago, it was at Christmas. I hadn't seen him in a few years because of COVID or whatever. So he didn't know that I had a YouTube channel and that I did this sort of stuff. I brought some handhelds just to show him, and I prepared a Miu Mini to give him because I thought that he'd like it. It was the Miu Mini from Lid NXT with the pre-built Onion OS card, which is my most recommended handheld and operating system because it's so well done and the games lists are basically perfect. He was blown away by these things. He had no idea that they existed, and he was so happy when I gave him the Miu Mini. He started a game of Castlevania Aria of Sorrow, and he was playing with it all night. But then at the end of the night, he was kind of bummed out, and he wanted to give me the Miu Mini Plus back. And he said that he just can't see it good enough. The screen was just too small and he couldn't read the text in the menu screens of Castlevania. So I had the RG Arc with me and I showed that to him and he instantly was like, oh my god, yes, that's way better. I could totally see this. Because a 4-inch screen device is just that much more real estate than a 3.5-inch screen device. So I ended up giving him the RG Arc and he was super grateful and happy with it, but I could kind of tell that he was bummed that he couldn't keep the Miu Mini instead because the RG Arc wasn't pocket friendly. And I didn't have anything else to suggest to him. That was the only cheap 4-inch screen device that would make sense for his needs. That experience, more than anything, made me realize that the 4-inch screen device market is sorely lacking. That's why I love the Zazzbiggle, and that I'm glad that it exists. And for anyone who really wants to see their games, either because they have problems seeing on smaller devices, or if, like me, you're just a fan of pixels and want to see them in all their retro-y glory, then the Zazzbiggle is the best choice right now. I mean, sure, it's very similar to the other Zazzy handhelds that Amberlick has been releasing, but it's different in a very important way, and that's reason enough to celebrate that we have this. Oh, and by the way, yes, I'm gonna get one of these for my uncle. And also, if you want a Zazzbiggle of your very own, you can grab one from Lid NXT, link in the doodad below. So I'd love to hear from you. Are you into 4-inch screen devices? Do you like them because of the bigger, more spacious retro gaming? Or because 3.5-inch screen devices are a little too small? Or are you still just sick of Amberlick releasing so much stuff, like most people seem to be? Leave your thoughts and anything else you'd like to tell me about your life in the comments below. And that's it from me. I'm TechDweeb. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.